Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. I'll be hosting today's show. Another change in the weather pattern coming in this week and actually already occurring out to the west there along the west coast. But this is for obviously south central Alaska, looking at some weekend precipitation amounts, water equivalent, and you can see over 2 inches of precipitation expected in Valdez this weekend. Talkeetna up there in the Sinton Valley about a little over an inch. Palmer 2/3 of an inch, and 1/2 inch possible here for the Anchorage area, about an inch in Kenai, and about 2/10 of an inch or a little under for the Gulken area there in the usual drier area, the Copper River Basin. And again, that's storm total liquid precipitation, which would translate into larger snowfall amounts inch-wise in the areas that occurs. Moving on to the warning chart here, we've currently got winter storm warnings going for St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast. That's out until 6 p.m. Saturday afternoon. And the one here for the Yukon Delta, that's out until midnight. And this into 6 a.m. for the Northwest Coast, 6 a.m. Saturday for the Northwest Coast, Noatak Valley area. Winter weather advisories out for the entire North Slope and the Arctic coast. Those are out until about 6 p.m. Saturday up in that area. Moving on to satellite imagery here, skipping past that frame. I forgot to take it out, but anyway, you can see big storm out here over the Bering, heading north. The main low center again heading north into the Russian Far East there in the front, pushing eastward. Pretty strong winds with this front, and of course additional snow, blowing snow, creating whiteout conditions St. Lawrence Island, maybe even areas of Yukon coast here on up into toward the Bering Strait with afternoon wind gusts 40-45 miles an hour up in the northwest, but some areas seeing much stronger winds than that with, for example, Gamble seeing wind gusts to 60 miles per hour during the afternoon today. Cape Romanzoff gusts 62 miles an hour, and then Cape Newenham had gusts 71 miles per hour, and winds kicking up 45 miles an hour areas like Marshall here, Unalakleet, and pretty gusty for St. Michael as well. And in the warmer conditions down to the south, rainfall occurred in the 12-hour Mount Indian at 4 p.m. this afternoon, or actually 3 p.m. at Falls Pass about an inch, and Cold Bay about 1/3 of an inch. By contrast, just 2/10 of an inch over the Pribilofs. And back to the west, band of snow showers here, mostly just east of Shemya, and just starting to nudge in toward the Adak area right through here. And that'll continue to push up. Seeing mixed rain and snow this afternoon over the Pribilofs. I'll probably change to mostly snow showers later on. Then up to the north here, a band of high clouds. That's about it. No precipitation at all with that. Crossing the central Arctic coast areas. And generally a pretty nice chilly day here over the central and eastern part of the state. And the southeast coast, seeing those strong winds, Lynn Canal and the northern channeled areas and the Juneau area, high wind warning has ended. Those winds will continue to come down, but conditions will stay dry with the cloudiness here staying off the coast, at least through tomorrow and tomorrow night. And on the chart here, you can see the front roughly in this position this afternoon with the strong winds, snow, blowing snow occurring right up through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, and on the increase there from the northwest coastal areas. But dry and sunshine across much of interior Alaska, right on down to the North Gulf Coast and Prince William Sound. Nice day across the Panhandle there. Still pretty windy, but those winds on the decrease, as I mentioned, up over the northern areas there, and the more showery conditions out over the Aleutians and the Bering Sea. And for tonight, that front pushes inland, begins to weaken here, but I'll push a band of snow inland across the deltas. You can see breaking out later tonight. Considerably better conditions there later tonight with possible clearing as high pressure tends to rebuild here behind this system. But look for some rain to push into Kodiak Island and mixed precipitation up into Bristol Bay and southern Cook Inlet with Kamishak Bay northwestward. That'll be all in the form of snow into the Kuskokwim Valley. And then the winter storm warnings and the whiteout conditions still occurring here with the strong winds, anywhere from 40 to 60 miles per hour, with additional snowfall up here from the Seward Peninsula and again St. Lawrence Island area right up to the northwest coast. Stays dry over the North Slope and Arctic coast. No change over the interior. Temperatures still falling anywhere from 25 to 40 below zero here in the colder areas of the eastern interior. And the winds continue to diminish, but they're not going to end completely. You can still see a pretty good gradient here across the northern panhandle, but you'll lose those stronger gusts that you saw earlier on. And but it'll stay breezy into tomorrow. Still have some good upper level support there going on, and conditions stay dry. Less wind tomorrow though, and a lot less wind down to the south there, but still lots of sunshine. This front weakening considerably as it pushes through this area. High pressure, 1,025 millibar high there, and the moisture from that will get really broken up, and just clouds and maybe some flurries or areas of light snow from the Copper River Basin up into that area. It stays pretty windy and snowy with, again areas of whiteout conditions, winter weather advisories, as I mentioned, for the North Slope and the Arctic coast. And those warnings still back to the west there, but a lot nicer conditions, high pressure ridging over the southwest part of the state. Look for some partly sunny skies tomorrow over that area. Dry with light winds. Next system here pushing rain and snow mixed up along the Alaska Peninsula. Rain into Kodiak Island, and this first front is be the first round of precipitation. Then another system develops. The one low center tracks northeastward. This one comes due north, and for Sunday looks something like this. Looks like more moisture, so heavier amounts of precipitation here in the North Gulf Coast. Like I mentioned, weekend total about 2 inches there for the Valdez area. And that'll translate into some pretty good snowfall for Thompson Pass, and some of that into the Copper River Basin, right up to the Alaska Range, with minimal amounts north of the Alaska Range over the eastern interior. A little more widespread areas of light snow back here to the west, to the Norton Sound area, Seward Peninsula. It looks pretty good from the North Slope out to the Arctic coast. Higher pressure, temporary break here coming through the Alaska Peninsula and approaching the coast again. Next big storm tracking northeastward into the Bering Sea there. Gale and storm force winds and rain here with that frontal system. It looks like that'll push into Bristol Bay on Sunday night and then push into the interior here during the day on Monday. Chance of moisture along the north coast of the Panhandle. Lows for tonight, again, anywhere from below zero for the Copper River Basin, but anywhere from 25 to 40 below right up to the North Slope. Milder here to the southwest, but still well below freezing. Definitely below freezing for all of the Panhandle, especially in the wind-sheltered areas. You'll see the coldest temperatures. Highs tomorrow, upper 20s to mid-30s for the Panhandle. Below zero in the north and much of the central interior. And lows for the following morning. Still cold here in the east and northeast on out to the Arctic coast. Milder, though, in the west.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to aviation, that front coming inland and weakening, but holding together enough for areas of IFR here from the northwest coast, right down across the western interior, Kuskokwim Valley, northeast Bristol Bay, pushing into Kamishak Bay, and on down to Kodiak Island. VFR in the east and the north, and a break here of VFR coming in behind the system, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, more IFR for Adak and Atka, VFR for the Panhandle. And for the afternoon Saturday, shaping up like this, VFR continues eastern Gulf right into the Panhandle, a little less over the eastern interior now. This first front really breaking up here, so most of the lower conditions will be south of the Alaska Range, and then from the central interior here back along the southern slopes of the Brooks Range, Kobuk Valley areas, with marginal VFR over the northern Bering St. Lawrence Island and marginal VFR for the Aleutians and the southern Bering Sea. And then for the day Sunday, the next system spreads more IFR into the southwest coast and inland here into the, especially the Kuskokwim Mountains, southern Kuskokwim Valley, and more IFR up to the Alaska Range. And Gulf of Alaska pretty well socked in right up into Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast. But VFR in northern eastern interior, some IFR up here along the northwest coast, and just catching the central Arctic coast. Band of VFR, and then more IFR at the next front, pushing in the far western Aleutians, and it stays VFR here across the southeast coast Sunday morning. And then some of that marginal stuff slips into the northern panhandle for Sunday afternoon, and the IFR back along the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, up in across the Talkeetna, northern Susitna Valley, actually mostly up north of the Susitna Valley to the Alaska Range, and a big area here over the central and western interior. And North Slope looks pretty good, western central Arctic coast, marginal, and this system will be moving northeastern into Bristol Bay during the evening on Sunday. Will in the afternoon be farther to the west, eastern Aleutians approaching the Pribilofs. Passes Anatuvik, VFR becoming IFR, same forecast for Adigan. Excuse me, for Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR to start, and then that system moving through. Look for it to become VFR into the latter part of the afternoon. That same trend for Rainy as well, improving into the afternoon after an IFR start to the day. Windy VFR, though, trending toward IFR in the afternoon. And for Isabel, VFR becoming marginal, but metastases VFR. Tanita, VFR, and possibly marginal in the afternoon. Portage, IFR. Chilkoot and White, VFR Saturday, and maybe a little more marginal on Sunday. For the freezing levels at the surface here, North Gulf Coast, actually just off the North Gulf Coast, and then right along the coast here of the Panhandle for tomorrow morning. 2,000 to 4,000 feet, increasing southerly flow here up into the southwest Gulf and around Kodiak Island, and then colder air again back to the south here. But the surface up toward Nunivak Island, but colder air out over the western Aleutians. And for the icing map here, we've got this area moving through and weakening. It'll be held together a lot better here as it hits the southwest coast, but it'll break up as it pushes eastward, and then kind of trailing off into the eastern Aleutians. Jet stream, good southwest flow here, upper level ridge holding over the eastern interior, and still some northerly flow, northwest flow actually here along the southeast coast there. But southwest flow increasing here, and of course that 100-knot jet will be pushing that system right on into the interior. 9,000 feet, 20 to 30 knots southwesterlies here in the interior, up to 40 over the Kenai Peninsula, but diminishing here over the Panhandle. And 40 knots ahead of this system, 25 on the back side of it, and about 60 over the northern Bering Sea. Looking at 3,000 feet here. High pressure kind of diminishing those winds as that ridge slowly shifts eastward at this elevation. But still on the breezy side over the southern southeast coast, about 30 knots there. But as you can see, a lot lighter to the north and southwest on the increase here, even the Copper River Basin, 15 to 20 knots. Not too strong, kind of some ridging here as that first front slips onto the northeast and weakens. But the next system with this low, kicking those winds up, especially back to the west, they're about 50 knots across Adak and Atka, southwest 30 to 40 from the northern Bering Sea right up across the Bering Strait and into the Chukchi Sea, 30 knots central Arctic coast, westerlies to west-northwest, about 30 here, following that system in behind over the southwest Bering and the Aleutians. Turbulence, moderate chop, definitely for St. Lawrence Island, Seward Peninsula, up in the northwest here, and then areas from Kodiak Island all the way back out to Shimianat too. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
When you think of a national park, you probably envision wide open natural spaces, undisturbed by human activity. There are indeed such places, but even in some of the most remote areas of a place like Kenai Fjords National Park in Alaska, the mark of man is present. Marine debris is a menace to the farthest reaches of our globe, and even designated national park lands are not immune. In the summer of 2009, the Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance, a grassroots conservation organization based in Seward, Alaska, decided to do something about the marine debris fouling the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park. Marine Debris Coordinator Tim Johnson had first-hand experience with the issue.
The summer before, my wife and I, Michelle, had done a paddle from Seward, sea kayak paddle from Seward to Homer. Really, our eyes were open to some areas that we didn't realize there was so much accumulation. It was very deceiving up front. You couldn't really get a feel for the extent and impact of it. You've got this nice high tide line that's quite pristine, and you really don't get a picture for the impact, the amount of debris in that area until you get behind those storm berms. You get back into the lagoons and the vegetation around those lagoons. And then you see the absolute extent back into that veg and how intertwined and enmeshed these decades of trash deposition. So we were just appalled by that and said we got to get something together on a larger scale.
The Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance is a local nonprofit community organization, and they have been instrumental in helping the Park Service obtain funding to get larger boats to help move the debris, and they get volunteer labor and organize the work trips. And so it's really a partnership between the Park Service and the community to help get out and really get a project done that in and of itself any one group couldn't do on their own.
Most of that trash was baggable. However, there were large items, huge, piles of hauser line, for example, that we just had to hoist up onto the boat.
The volunteers didn't just bag, haul, and hoist the garbage, but also carefully recorded what types of debris were collected.
In many ways, the debris itself is a resource. Archaeologists use middens, the trash heaps, as a way of analyzing past cultures. And in one sense, marine debris is a form of a midden. It's a trash heap that left for the future would be something that people could use to analyze our culture. It may not say the best things about our culture or everything that we want, but we need to be able to document what we've done so that we can preserve that legacy, make sure that we as a society don't forget what we've been doing.
We had two larger categories of marine debris that we picked up. Commercial fishing means like, say, gill nets, large hauser lines, anything that would be associated with more of a commercial fishing scale. And then the second category was more recreational fishing and household, which would be general plastics, things like that. So we had about a 75% of the commercial fishing marine debris element, and about 25% of the recreational and household further out the bay. And we had the exact opposite the closer we got to Seward within the bay. It was about 25% commercial fishing versus 75% recreational fishing and household.
The trash is not just unsightly for park visitors, but also poses threats to wildlife and marine habitat.
Really one of the larger issues now that you go to this plastic that can really get into the food web and affect the food web differently than something like glass.
These substances, for instance, all these polystyrene blocks that are breaking down into all these little crumbly bits are further breaking down on a microscopic level, and how much of an impact that has, in this ecosystem is yet to be determined, but I think it's got pretty high potential.
Well known that sea turtles will eat plastic bags floating in the water. They look like jellyfish to a sea turtle, and obviously a plastic bag doesn't go well in the digestive system of a turtle. Albatross will see small pieces of plastic floating on the surface and think they're small fish and other food sources, and eat that in their stomachs, especially in some of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. They'll find dead albatross that have starved to death with a full stomach, and it's full of pieces of plastic.
We're affecting our local areas this way, but we need to be thinking about it from more of a state and a global, international scale. And most importantly, to try and focus on prevention of it coming in the first place. Because we're just going to see this continuing, to build up on our beaches unless we're able to get a little bit more of an approach on prevention on the front end.
Marine debris is really a global problem, in all the oceans, and there are many different sources. Global shipping is one. Fishing debris from commercial fishing, recreational boating activity on land, stuff blowing off land, washing down streams, people just throwing stuff on the shore.
Though the problem can seem overwhelming, Johnson remains upbeat about making a positive difference.
No, you gotta start locally. You gotta take control of what you can do, and make something with that, and try and move on from there.
Overall, more than 9 tons of debris was removed from the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park and transported back to Seward to be deposited in a landfill.
People gave a lot to the project in order to make it happen. That was awesome. One of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. Being able to put that large of a group of volunteers together, dedicated volunteers to put that much effort and give that much time and pull all the different agencies together to see it all happen was incredible. It was incredible. Yeah, very fulfilling experience.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis showing the ice edge continuing north from what it was yesterday due to the continued strong southerly winds. And that pattern is expected to continue for the next 4 or 5 days. And by Wednesday, looking for the ice edge to advance to the north anywhere from 20 to 40 nautical miles. Marine forecasts here, some missing data this afternoon due to some computer problems, but Lynn Canal gales into at least midday tomorrow, north 35 knots, diminishing to 30 in the afternoon. Small craft advisories out here along the coast, as well as for Stevens Passage with lighter winds for Clarence Strait, looking north to northeast at about 25 there along the coast, sea 6 to 8 feet. Outlook for Sunday, south winds in Lynn Canal at 20 knots and southeast 20, gusts 35 for Stevens Passage. Otherwise northeast at 20. Clarence Strait south to southwest 20 to 25 on the south coast. Westerlies 20 to 25 on the north coast. And for Sunday, Prince William Sound, easterly gales 35 knots with seas 6 or 7 feet. Southeast 40 with 11-foot seas for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Western North Gulf Coast south at 30 knots with 10-foot seas, about the same there for the Barren Islands, and Kamishak Bay southeast at 30. North 25 knots south of the Forelands and Cook Inlet, northeast 25 with 6-foot seas for the northern Cook Inlet. And then for Saturday here, Bristol Bay northeast 25, turning east 25 to 30 or so here for the Alaska Peninsula, both north and south, and northeast 25 for Shelikof Strait. And for the outlook on Sunday, everything there for Sunday, southwest 35, Kodiak Island, seas up to 17 feet, Sitkinak to Castle Cape southwest at 40, and then westerlies here across the Alaska Peninsula, 30 to 40 knots, strongest south of the peninsula where seas 22 feet, and Bristol Bay south winds at 30, with seas running at about 9 feet. And then for the Western Aleutians, good storm force winds for Sunday, south 55 knots, the next storm rolling into the area there, coming north of the chain, and storm force winds in advance of the front, 40 to 50 knots for the Fox Islands, 50 knots for the Adak-Atka area, seas approaching 30 feet. And for the southwest coast on Sunday, south of Nunivak Island, west 30 knots right into Kuskokwim Bay. Lighter winds up over the northern Bering, 15 out of the west or St. Lawrence Island, northwest 15 there north of Nunivak Island, and small craft advisories for both the Pribilofs and St. Matthew Island. And for the eastern Boulevard Sea, south to southwest at about 15, picking up to roughly around 20 knots on the central coast. Brisk wind advisories here for the west side all the way down to Cape Thompson to the Bering Strait southeast at 20. And then for tonight, again, this front weakening as it pushes inland, but should push a band of snow in across the Kuskokwim Valley. Rain or snow here, Kamishak Bay down to just rain, Kodiak Island, and then improving along the southwest coast, staying dry and cold, temperatures well below zero, especially up over the upper Yukon Valley, eastern central North Slope areas. And the Arctic coast staying dry with dry conditions, still breezy in areas with those winds down below warning levels for the southeast coast, and even less wind in store for Saturday here for the, tomorrow there for the Panhandle. And this front really weakening as it pushes eastward into the interior, into this area high pressure, rain or snow along the coast, chance of snow. South central Alaska, snow and blowing snow continues with those warnings out for the northwest coast. Winter weather advisories continue for the North Slope and the Arctic coast. Next system pushing rain and snow mixed up to the northeast across the Alaska Peninsula. The low center roughly in this position tomorrow afternoon. A new one developing here, and that one will push northward to about this position on Sunday, and the other one will track due north to the Yukon Delta or so. So an area, widespread area of light snow here over the interior. A lot less wind though, as you can see, back to the west and northwest with ridging over the North Slope and the Arctic coast. Moderate amounts of rain for the North Gulf Coast and a mixture a little ways inland with chance of snow in the Copper River Basin. Look for some pretty good snow in the Thompson Pass area, increasing moisture along the north coast of the Panhandle. You can see lighter winds and mostly clear down to the south. Next big storm, again, gale and storm force winds coming into the Bering Sea. This will push into Bristol Bay Sunday night and then into the interior on Monday for more rain and snow and gusty winds. Otherwise, that's a look at the weather for tonight. Thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.